Good to be in contact with you. So my name is Saddharaja, for those of you who don't know me. And I'm giving a talk tonight called The True Individual, the Essence of Creativity. Sounds very grand, doesn't it? But let's see what it's really about. Okay, so little story. By the time I was 7 years old, I knew what it was that I was supposed to do when I grew up. I was supposed to be an agricultural worker or a countryside worker. That was the messages I was getting from all those people around me very, very strongly. My father was a forester. My mother came from a long line of agricultural workers, and she did that part-time. My older brother became a forester, and all my friends were farm boys at school. Their fathers had farms, or they worked on farms or whatever. And yeah, so that was the message that I got. And by the time I was 7, that's what I was going to be. It was very clear. And I was going to be a ploughman or a shepherd. I was going to look after cows. I was going to be a pig keeper. I was going to grow crops, harvest potatoes, or I was going to work in the forest, and that kind of thing. By the time I was, oh yeah, and also there were particular special skills like digging irrigation ditches, or laying hedges, or pest control, as well as livestock. There was all that as well as part of it. By the time I was 10, I had mastered all those things. I'd mastered every one of those things, because I'd just done so much of it with my father and with other people. Yeah, I mean, I knew how to milk cows and how to clean up a farm shipping afterwards, because I'd done it most Saturdays since I was a little kid. Tractors and trailers. By the time I was 10, I could not only reverse a tractor, but I could reverse a tractor and trailer into a barn without hitting anything. I was really good on the tractor. Yeah. And my father ran a sawmill, and I knew exactly how to turn a tree trunk into a whole load of perfect planks and then put them in creosote afterwards. I had a strong, healthy body when I was a teenager. And when I wasn't at school, quite a lot of my time was spent helping out, doing all kinds of forestry and farm work. So there was a wide range of jobs available to me when I left school under the heading of agricultural worker. The word university was never mentioned in my household. And all my friends at school, as I say, they were the same, and our social world revolved around the Young Farmers Club. That's where I went with all our famous welly chucking competitions and all that kind of stuff. That was me. Yeah, my parents had a small holding, so we had pigs and sheep and all that. And I grew up in the north of England in the Lake District, very beautiful part of the country, near a place called Windermere. My parents were pretty poor, actually, and they lived in a tied cottage on a huge estate. And that was my life. I left school at 16, and I went straight into agricultural work. That was very, very normal for me to do that. My older brother had done that. However, there was a secret that was going on whilst I was in the middle of all this. There was this big secret which I wasn't telling anyone about, and that was that I hated agricultural work. I loathed it. I didn't want to do it at all. I wasn't interested in it. And what I really wanted to be was an artist. And I wanted to practice Buddhism very deeply and thoroughly. I'd converted to Buddhism when I was 14. And actually, this is what I've done. For the last 50 years, I've been an artist, and I practice Buddhism very thoroughly. Both of these interests were unacceptable to the community that I grew up in. No one was interested. It was a very tight-knit, church-going, Protestant agricultural community. And that's how it was. Very, very different in the 60s and the 70s. There was no internet. You know, we didn't even have a telephone. And a lot of our friends didn't even have a telephone in the house. And a very, very different world entirely. It's very hard for, you know, I'm not that old. I mean, I'm nearly 64, but kind of trying to communicate to younger people what that was like growing up in a farming community like that. It's very, very different. And I was different, and I was artistic. I liked history. I loved reading classical novels of English literature. I used to read the mystical Tibetan novels of Lobsang Rampa. And I went to art galleries regularly. I was deeply into landscape watercolor painting. You know, never told anyone about it. My favorite form of transport was the bicycle, and it still is. So I really didn't fit in. I really didn't fit in at all. No one understood. I couldn't talk to anyone around me about it. I was widely criticised when people did find out what I was really doing. And I was told to stop being so silly, which is a kind of standard northern rebuke, really. And yeah, I've got a son who's had a much happier upbringing than I had. And he's got his own family now. And he says to me, how did you put up with it, Dad? You know, how did you deal with it? And actually, it was quite tough. Looking back now, it seems quite ridiculous, really, completely unnecessary. I wasn't fitting in, and it was a problem for my parents, my family. I wasn't conforming to what the group were expecting of me. I wanted to be me, whatever that was. I wanted to be a true individual, if you like, though I didn't know what that was back then. I wanted to follow the Buddhist path, I wanted to follow an artist path. Back then, it was very unclear. But the intuition was very, very strong. It would have been sort of so easy just to sort of give in and become, you know, a pig keeper or something and get yourself a tight cottage and just go from there. It would have been so, there were a lot of those jobs available to me. But I didn't do that. In the end, I went to art college, and the rest, as they say, is history. Because something else was drawing me on, which I couldn't ignore. And yeah, I had to go against the group and come up against the disapproval of the group at that time. So I tell this story because it does show the limitations of what we call the group. And Arthur City was talking about that last week, about, you know, the group and the individual. I wanted to be an individual, but the group wasn't approving that. It was very difficult. So in this series, we've been talking about the true individual, haven't we? And what that is. What is a true individual? How does that fit into the Buddhist path? Who is a true individual? Well, we've had some really good talks on this fascinating subject from Kula Priya, who talked on the challenge of consciousness, Saddharaja, a personal invitation. Yashidaka talked about becoming ourselves. And last week, Arthur said he talked about the individual and the group. So tonight, I'm talking about the essence of creativity. So if you missed those other talks, they're all there on YouTube on the Cambridge Buddhist Centre website, so you can catch up on all that if you want to. So the blurb for my talk on the Buddhist Centre website says, what does it mean to be truly creative? Is this something limited to artists? Or can we find deep creativity within any genuinely human life? Now, I don't know who wrote that. Was that you? Did you? No, I didn't write that. Really. Anyway, it's a good little kind of overview of what I'm talking about, really. So there's two really important questions in that. So let's have a look at those questions. Let's look at the first one. As I say, I've already said something about my upbringing and the challenges in my attempt to be creative. At the time, they seemed completely unsurmountable when I was a young man. Today, after 50 years on the Buddhist path, they just seem really easy to deal with. Yeah. Things have changed in the UK and around the world, but more importantly, I've really changed. I've grown and developed and become more aware and more confident in my path, my spiritual path. I don't need anybody's approval. I don't need anyone to be happy with what I'm doing in my life. I'm just completely confident in my own authenticity and the authenticity of what I'm doing. But back then, it wasn't like that. I don't easily fall into neat categories. If I present myself to the ordinary world, which I regularly have to do, I don't easily fall into neat categories. But really what I am is a retired 63-year-old white Buddhist, British ordained Buddhist who looks like he could have been an agricultural worker. So let's have a look at this first question that's in the blurb. What does it mean to be truly creative? What does that mean? I think it's a great question. It goes to the heart of this whole subject of individuality and of Buddhist practice. So when we talk about creativity, many of us will immediately think of the arts. That often comes up, the arts, creativity. And I learned a lot of that at art college. Went to art college and got qualified and had a career and all that. So we're talking about the visual arts, architecture, ceramics, drawing, filmmaking, printmaking, painting, photography, sculpting. They're the kind of visual arts, aren't they? And then there's also the literary arts. There's writing, fiction, drama, poetry, and prose. Yeah, they're all creative. There's the performing arts as well. Dance, music, and theatre. Just so much creative stuff in all that. And perhaps you've got an interest in that. Perhaps you're even deeply involved in those things. I certainly am. And they certainly require a lot of discipline and a lot of creativity to engage with them to any kind of proper degree and training. So they're an important focus for kind of human cultural endeavour. So important as they are, it might surprise you to know that I don't think one has to be involved in these creative arts to be truly creative. So I'll repeat that. I don't think you need to be involved in the creative arts to be truly creative. Yeah. Because there's an arty world out there of creative people, isn't there? We don't have to join that. If you want to, that's great. That might be really good. We don't have to be truly creative. Because, getting to the heart of my lecture already, the essence of creativity is in the mind. It's all in the mind. That's the main part of creativity. And, well, Buddhism, if you know anything about it at all, you'll know that it's all about the mind. Everything begins and ends with the mind in Buddhism. So everything that we experience in the world, everything that we do, it all happens in our minds, primarily through the medium of the senses. So we've got the senses, they're all connected up to the mind, and that's what we experience. We're not experiencing that, we're probably dead. So all we can ever know about the world is through the mind. So if your mind tends to be habitually angry and full of hatred, then you'll have a particular kind of mind, a particular kind of life. If your mind is primarily focused on mindfulness and awareness, metta, as in Vipassana, then you'll have another kind of life entirely. And that's what we're doing. So I'll just read you a couple of verses from a great Buddhist text called the Dhammapada. This is the very first two verses. Here we go. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, even as the cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox drawing the cart. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows like a shadow that never departs. So where the Dhammapada is talking about the pure mind, well, that's another term for creativity. It's another term for individuality, as we say in Triratna. So in Buddhism, we have a whole set of teachings on the creative mind and how to cultivate that creative mind. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. And this is very much the focus of the two meditation practices that we do, mindfulness of breathing and metta bhavana. Sometimes it's easier to get hold of the creative mind by looking at the opposite of the creative mind. And the opposite of the creative mind is something we call the reactive mind. And that reactive mind is that part of us that is asleep, that is unaware, that is conditioned by others, it's mechanical, it's repetitive, it's the everyday, routine, unenlightened mind, that doesn't think for itself in a creative way. So in a state of unawareness, we go to work, we sleep, we talk, we play, and we vote. We go to the polls in a very kind of unaware kind of way, sometimes called the zombie mind, the mind that looks for nothing else other than just to keep existing. So I've got a little here on my mind. Can you see that on there? So yeah, the reactive mind, it's the ordinary, as I say, the ordinary everyday mind. Yeah. It doesn't act, it reacts. So you have to sort of think about that. It reacts, it doesn't actually act. It needs external stimulus, it needs something to kind of keep it stimulating, keep it going. Otherwise it just sort of, it's not free and it's not creative. So that was me with the agricultural work. I was doing the agricultural work very, very well, really, but I was dead. Emotionally, I was quite dead. I was digging those ditches, I was feeding those pigs, but I wasn't really there. I wasn't really engaged and happy about it. I certainly didn't feel free and creative doing that. And it's also mechanistic and repetitive. Things just go round and round and round and round in the reactive mind, and not in a good way. The same old stuff, you find that in your life, oh, I've been here before and it's not good. And here I am again in life, and how did I get here? Well, you probably got there through the reactive mind. So it's unaware, it's asleep, it's on autopilot. It doesn't think creatively. So next time you hear somebody at work saying, I hate this job, and they've said that many times before to you in your work, then that's the reactive mind. I used to work in a hospital, and I worked with a man who was very, very good healthcare assistant. I was a healthcare assistant, and he complained every hour of every shift for the 3.5 years that I worked with him. He just moaned and moaned about the job. But he was really good at the job and would never leave. But so I used to say to him, how are you doing today, Martin? He said, well, I'm stuck in this place. With a few expletives thrown in. And that's the reactive mind. And it was very difficult to get him out of that, because everything was bad. And that's the kind of way that we can get into things. So part of us is like that. A lot of us will experience that in our own lives, but quite often. So watch out for the reactive mind. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, I wanted to say something. I'm going to go back a bit. As I say, Buddhism has, it's got deep teachings in this area. I will move on to the creative mind in a minute. But before I do that, I wanted to show you what Buddhism says in great detail about the reactive mind. So this is a little drawing I did. This is what's called the Tibetan Wheel of Life. And so it's in a way quite technical looking. But yeah, it's saying that life is just like a kind of endless wheel that just keeps constantly going round. It's deeply symbolic. It's said to go back to the Buddha. In the Sarvastivadin tradition, one of the early schools of Buddhism, it says that Buddha actually insisted that this was painted on the vestibule of monasteries. So when people went in and out, they could actually see what it was they were trying to leave behind. So lots and lots of symbols there, and I haven't got time to explain it all to you, but I'll say a few things. In the middle here, you'll see a rooster, you'll see a snake, and you'll see a pig. And they represent greed, hatred, and delusion. And it's said that greed, hatred, and delusion just drive this whole reactive mind. That's at the center of it all. We've also got a white path and a black path. So you've got white path of beings sort of heading upwards, looking kind of very happy. And you've also got black path of people kind of falling down into bad states. And that's the whole area of karma. So much I could talk about karma. How we act, whether skillfully or unskillfully, really makes a difference to our experience. And this whole other circle here is called the 6 realms of existence. Fascinating stuff. So over here, you've got kind of beings with armor on, and fighting, and warring, all these warring beings. And of course, whenever we turn the news on, we see lots of this sort of thing going on, don't we? These days, it's sort of tanks and nuclear missiles, but it hasn't always been that way. By the way, you can see these states as not just literal worlds, but psychological states as well. We can get in a very combative kind of way, can't we, in our lives, in mental states. Down here, you've got the animal kingdom, the animal realm, and once again, psychologically, there are times when we can become like animals. Yeah, go to a football match on a Saturday afternoon. Sometimes you'll see a bit of animal behaviour there sometimes. I quite like football actually, but I do know it happens. But there is literally the animal kingdom. Down here, you've got the hell realm, where beings are in torture. They're really having a very rough time indeed. Over here is a number of strange beings called the hungry ghosts. And these are the beings with great big bellies and tiny little pinhole mouths. And they're trying to get something all the time, which something that doesn't really fully satisfy them. So if you want to see some hungry ghosts, go to the shopping mall over here on Saturday morning around about 11 o'clock. And you'll see people, they've got their money, they're trying to find something to buy that's going to satisfy them. And then they get home and they think, well, it's not that good. And so that's the kind of state we can get into. Over here is one of the better realms, that's called the human realm. There's just ordinary things going on in that. People are eating, working, looking after children, painting, drawing and painting, all sorts of good things, and meditating. They're meditating as well. And over here we've got the what's called the God realm. So everything's really beautiful. And beings are very beautiful and glamorous. It's the world of the beautiful people. But you'll notice that there's a Buddha in all the realms. And he's carrying a particular thing with him, which is what people in those realms really need. So the animal realm's he's got a book which represents culture. In the hell realm, he's holding ambrosia, which is something that will heal people. And in the God realm, he's playing a lute. It's a little guitar type, mandolin type thing, and he's playing the melody of impermanence. He's saying, yeah, you're having a wonderful time now, but everything is impermanent. And you're going to have to come out of that realm at some point. You're going to get old. So it's so much. Oh, by the way, in this particular realm, human realm, he's teaching the Dharma, he's teaching Buddhism. And there's so much more connected around the outside of the wheel, but I haven't really got time to go into it all. But it's connected with this teaching of conditionality, condition co-production. We talked about things arise in dependence upon conditions and cease upon conditions. So you've got a blind man with a stick, you've got a potter with his wheel, you've got a monkey jumping about in a tree, and you've got 4 men in a boat. There you've got a house with 5 windows. Here you've got a couple embracing. Here you've got a man with an arrow in his eye. And here you've got a woman giving a man a drink. Here we have a woman actually plucking some fruit from a tree. We've got a pregnant woman. We've got a woman giving birth. We've got someone being carried to the cremation ground. This was all said to exist over 3 lifetimes, not just 1 lifetime, but it only really makes sense over 3 lifetimes. And the whole wheel is gripped by this strange demon called the demon of impermanence. So not much time to go into all that, but it shows you the kind of level of detail that Buddhism has gone into this whole world of the reactive mind, or conditioned existence. So that's the kind of vision of conditioned existence, the existence that we all live in. By the way, if you want a copy of this, if you go on the Buddhist Center website, if you look under news, you can download yourself a copy if you want to look at it. There's lots and lots of tapes on Free Buddhist Audio where you can hear about the wheel in more detail. Good, okay. So let's move on to the creative mind. And what is that? What's the creative mind? And that's a mind that's open to us at any moment, all the time. This is the Buddhist message. And the characteristics of the creative mind is it's not dependent on external stimulus. Yeah. So you don't need someone to cheer you up and make things better for you. You can do that for yourself. You can be creative yourself, even in very, very difficult circumstances, challenging circumstances. Yeah, the creative mind is free. It's not restricted by circumstances. So there I was back on the farm. I felt restricted, but I didn't have to. I was trying to kind of paint and draw and meditate and all that. So I was having a go, but I wasn't backed up enough. So the creative mind is not restricted. It's also very productive and active. You do things. Yeah, you're not a victim in some way of circumstances. You say, right, I'm actually going to do something for myself and for other people. The creative mind responds rather than reacts. Yeah, it sees a situation, right, I want to do something about that. The creative mind is the aware mind. So this is where, the mindfulness of breathing, awareness practice generally comes in. Without awareness, we can't act creatively. But it's also not dominated simply by craving and aversion. Because we've got a little bit of a glimpse there from the wheel of life. Craving, hatred, delusion drive everything in this world of ours. So it's free of that. The creative mind is not so bound up in craving and aversion and delusion. The creative person has the choice to act. It's always got a choice, moment to moment, how I want to be. Yeah, we don't just have to be conditioned by what happens to us. We've always got a choice. And the creative person has the choice to act skillfully in the flow of pleasure and pain that life brings. Because life it's a mix, isn't it, of pleasure, pain, and neutral experiences. That's what human life is. And we can't always control it, can we? I've had quite a nice day today, with quite nice things happening most of the time. but something very challenging happened at lunchtime. And you can just never really say how it's going to go, can you? Yeah. So the creative mind is full of metta. So as Yashodhaka was leading us through metta bhavana in such a skillful way earlier, it's that's the kind of experience that we have with the creative mind and metta. So there's a little quote here from Saddharaja, our founder. The creative mind loves where there was no reason to love. Yeah, so it's a really radical idea, really, creative mind. A great characteristic of the creative mind is, well, the taste of freedom. The taste of freedom. If you're involved, if you're practicing a creative mind on a regular basis, you will get that. You certainly get moments, quite a lot of moments of the taste of freedom where you just feel, wow, life is so much better than the way I used to be. And that's something that can become much more permanent in your life after a lot of practice. The taste of freedom. So you'll know it when it's happening. Finally, I want to say a little bit about the spiral path. And then it'll be time to go into groups. How are we doing for time? Oh yeah, doing okay. Okay, so just like with the wheel, Buddhism's got quite detailed teachings about the creative mind as well and how to cultivate it. Basically, all the practices that we do at the Buddhist Center and within Sri Ratna are designed to help us follow what's called the spiral path. So that's the wheel of life down there that you just saw. There it is. And there's definite junctures on the wheel of life where you can start to get off. You know, we use this term sometimes, stop the world, I want to get off. Well, that's literally what's going on with the wheel of life, we're getting off. And one of these is what's called dukkha, which is an untranslatable word, really, Buddhist word, but really means unsatisfactory. Things are not very good, they're rubbish, really. They're painful, difficult. We all know about that. So if we have one of those experiences, and we see the significance of that within the Buddhist tradition, within the wheel of life, well, that can lead to faith. So once again, all these links here, we've got 11 links, they, in dependence on the previous one, they lead to another. So it's what we call conditionality again, Vichita Samudpada. Things arise in dependence on others. So in dependence upon dukkha arises faith. Faith in creativity, the Buddhist path, joy, and lead on to joy, rapture, and tranquility. Not just normal tranquility, by the way. Not just sort of tranquil, oh, I'm having quite a chilled out kind of day. No. It's much deeper and more subtle than that. It's a very strong spiritual condition. Bliss, concentration, once again, not just normal concentration, very, very deep kind of satisfying concentration. It's said that on the spiritual path, there's a certain point that you can reach. Buddhist path called knowledge and vision of reality. So that's where you actually do see the reality of the world in a very, very deep way. Sometimes called insight, sometimes called the arising of the bodhicitta. But it's very, very deep experience, but it's said to be irreversible. Once you've seen it, once you've been there, you can't go back to, looking after pigs or whatever it is. You can't, an ordinary kind of life. You really, it's an irreversible condition for you. And you'll take that on to future lives. And then it's simply a question of moving on towards full and perfect enlightenment. Once again, don't be filled by disenchantment and dispassion. It's not like it's a very deep and sophisticated mental state. Okay, so this is the essence of Buddhist creativity. It doesn't have to involve the arts, but if you're involved in the arts, that's a great thing in itself. But really the essence of Buddhist creativity is moment to moment, how you live your life in the hurly-burly of the world and what you're doing. So this is the essence of creativity. It's about the mind, and then how you play that out through your body and through your speech. It's also the path of the true individual, which is what we've been talking about. This is what a true individual does. He's practicing this path. So the wheel of life represents very much group behavior, and the spiral path represents individuality, the path of individuality. So I probably said enough, actually. Probably said, might have even said too much. So now it's time for group discussion. So if you'd like to get yourself into groups, and well, what's your view of it? What's your general approach to it? Is it, oh my God, what on earth is all this? Or is it, are there things there that speak to you, that you can see, that you think, well, no, I can connect with that. There's a bit of wisdom and compassion there. So let's kick that around in the discussion room. Thank you.